This is CGTN, China Global Television Network. Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories: BRICS gets bigger. 6 more countries join up. China's president says the expansion will inject new vitality to the group's cooperation. Our other headlines: Japanese seafood banned by China as treated wastewater from the defunct Fukushima nuclear power station is released into the Pacific. Body believed to be that of Wagner Group chief Yevgeny Prigozhin has been removed from the plane crash wreckage outside Moscow. And Donald Trump is due to surrender in Atlanta, where he's facing his 4th indictment, accused of trying to reverse his election loss in Georgia. The BRICS group has agreed to admit 6 new members to the bloc of major economies: Argentina, Egypt, Iran, Ethiopia, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates will join the alliance on the 1st of January next year. China's President Xi Jinping said BRICS shoulders important responsibilities for world peace and development. Well, let's talk to our correspondent Robert Nagila, watching events for us in Johannesburg. Robert, what else has President Xi had to say at the summit?
Well, President Xi called this agreement historical. He said it represented a new beginning for developing countries and that it showed a commitment from BRIC countries to the developing world. Now, he also said that it would revitalize, re-energize BRIC cooperation development between BRIC countries and the rest of the world, with good reason. Once these 6 countries joined the bloc on January 1st, 2024, their total, it will basically represent 35 to 37% of global trade. That's huge. So it is a big deal. There's a lot of people who are looking at it and beginning to consider the implications of this deal, especially as far as the global financial system is concerned. We know that the BRIC members have not been very happy with the global financial system, which they feel is unfairly geared towards the West. So a big deal, and President Xi basically saying that this would help to forge developing countries, a new path for developing countries. Back to you.
Robert, thank you for that. Our correspondent Robert Nagila in Johannesburg. Let's talk now to Professor Jeffrey Sachs, Director of the Centre for Sustainable Development at Columbia University. Jeffrey, welcome back to the programme. Good to see you. So 6 new members joining BRICS. This is, I think, the first expansion since 2010 when South Africa joined. What is the significance of today, of this enlargement?
This is a big deal. First of all, the BRICS, even in the original 5, were already larger in economic terms, measured at international prices, than the G7 countries. Now, another 400 million people in these 6 countries has been added, and significant countries: Brazil's largest neighbor, Argentina, the 2 large countries of the east corner of Africa, Egypt and Ethiopia, major Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, and Iran. So significant countries geopolitically. They constitute about 5% of the world GDP and 5% of the world's population. It adds significantly to the geopolitical weight and the economic weight of the BRICS. And what all the emphasis was on economically was to get out of the hold of the U.S., which has politicized, unfortunately, the international financial system. That's the big issue in practical terms. The U.S. just started confiscating reserves of countries that it didn't like. And these countries are saying we need a different way to trade, to make settlements, and not to be under the control or dominance of a U.S. dollar banking system that is politicized, frankly, at this point.
The host South Africa say many countries, perhaps dozens, have expressed interest in joining BRICS. Paint us a picture of what the future looks like. What's your outlook for BRICS?
Well, there are two kinds of outlooks. One not very desirable in my view, and the other really desirable. The desirable view is that we really reach a multipolar and multilateral world in which more and more countries are vibrant, engaged in international trade, and having their voice in setting global rules. And the BRICS could be a stepping stone to a true multipolar world rather than the North Atlantic-led world of the 19th and 20th century. The other possibility is that we really end up in two competing blocks, a US-led bloc and a BRICS bloc. And that would be quite unfortunate, very dangerous politically. It would mean a breakdown of cooperation. But it could come to that if we don't actually all commit to multilateralism. I've been a critic over recent years of US foreign policy as presuming that the US leads. And I've been saying to US policymakers for years, if you travel around the world like I do, the other countries don't see the US as leader. They want the US to be cooperative. We don't know whether we're going to this break in the world system, which could be very dangerous, or whether this is a stepping stone to say, we don't want the North Atlantic to lead us, as was the past 200 years. We want a true multipolar system, and not one where one currency not only dominates, but is manipulated to confiscate reserves and to pressure countries into abiding by US foreign policies.
Jeffrey, good to talk to you. Thanks for coming on the programme again. Professor Jeffrey Sachs, Director of the Centre for Sustainable Development at Columbia University.
Thank you.
Now, the rest of the day's news, and Japan's controversial plan to release nuclear-contaminated water from the crippled Fukushima nuclear power station is now underway. Treated water is being released into the Pacific Ocean. It's prompted widespread criticism in neighbouring countries. CGTN's correspondent Jack Barton reports now from Fukushima.
After years of deliberation and controversy, Japan's Tokyo Electric Power Company, better known as TEPCO, began releasing treated water that had been used to cool damaged nuclear reactors through a 1 kilometre-long pipeline. The initial release of contaminated water from the Daiichi nuclear power plant is expected to take about 17 days and involve 7,800 tons of contaminated water diluted with seawater, which is currently being released into the Pacific Ocean. But that's just the start. Which is why protests continued further south in Tokyo.
The release of contaminated water will continue for the next 30 to 40 years. The Fukushima nuclear disaster is not over. This time, only around 1% of the water will be released. From now on, we will keep fighting for a long time to stop the long-term discharge of contaminated water.
I will never forgive the Prime Minister because he's risking the health of the ocean. We may not be able to eat fish anymore. I'm against the release plan no matter what. I'm so angry, that's how I feel.
As the contaminated water was released, TEPCO's president attempted to reassure people in the seafood industry via a video message that they would be compensated for losses, and said he would seek to reassure China.
China is a very important trading partner for our country. We believe it's necessary to thoroughly explain about the safety, and we would like to do our best to get the ban lifted as soon as possible.
For some, Tokyo's assessment and the all-clear given by the International Atomic Energy Agency are enough.
The IAEA and the government say it's okay, therefore it's safe.
But the local fishing industry union is angry, saying it was not given enough prior warning for the release. And many locals remain concerned about the long-term economic impact on their prefecture that was only starting to get back on its feet. Jack Barton, CGTN, Fukushima.
Well, Tokyo is calling on China to reverse its ban on all seafood products from Japan. Our correspondent Anne Cheng is in Hong Kong.
Since midnight, Hong Kong has banned aquatic products from 10 prefectures in Japan, including Fukushima, Tokyo, Chiba, and Nagano. And the products banned include fresh, chilled, frozen, and dried products, including seaweed and sea salt. Now, this is in response to Japan releasing treated wastewater from the stricken Fukushima nuclear power plant and the health risks some say it may bring. As for when this ban will be lifted, the government says that won't happen too soon and that it's necessary to first see the impact of the released wastewater on food safety. For that purpose, as well as response measures, a multi-department task force has been formed. Meanwhile, aquatic products from Japan that aren't banned will be tested to make sure radiation levels don't exceed safe levels before they're allowed into the market. And every working day, the government will publicly share data on the radiation levels of food samples from Japan, as well as Hong Kong waters and local catches. Earlier, I spoke to some residents about consuming Japanese seafood, and there were mixed reactions. Some said they're afraid of health risks and will avoid Japanese seafood, while others said it's not a big deal and will continue to eat it. Several noted that now Japanese seafood is limited, prices may go up. Japanese seafood is popular in Hong Kong, but it looks like Japanese restaurants in the city will be affected. According to the Hong Kong Federation of Restaurants and Related Trades, 1/3 of Japanese restaurants in the city could shut down in the next 6 months. Meanwhile, the Travel Industry Council predicts that tourist numbers from Hong Kong to Japan will be down by at least 20% for several weeks to a month, and people's interest in traveling will depend on the situation after the discharge. Anne Cheng, CGTN, Hong Kong.
India's lunar rover has started its exploration of the surface of the dark side of the moon a day after the country's spacecraft Chandrayaan-3 landed near the so-called South Pole. It'll examine rocks and craters, gathering data and images for analysts. It'll also try and find frozen water, which scientists believe could support human habitation. The technology giant Nvidia says sales have hit a record and more than doubled as demand for its artificial intelligence chips soars. Revenue jumped above $13.5 billion in the second quarter, and the company expects revenue of around $16 billion in the 3 months to the end of September. That's much higher than Wall Street expectations and would represent a rise of around 170% on the same time last year. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, we'll be in Atlanta for the appearance of former US President Donald Trump, where he's due to formally surrender over charges of election meddling.
This week on Razor, as nature's engineers restore wetlands, they also restore habitats for other animals and plants, as well as reduce the risk of flooding.
It's worth noting, guys, the dynamics of the dam here, really interesting. You've got a fairly vertical front face, and then the back edge of the dam tapers back down, and they'll push sediment and stones, anything they can get really into the back of that.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. BRICS gets bigger. 6 more countries join. China's president says the expansion will inject new vitality to the group's cooperation. Our other headlines: Japanese seafood banned by China as treated wastewater from the defunct Fukushima nuclear power station is released into the Pacific. A body believed to be that of the Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin has been removed from the wreckage of the plane crash north of Moscow. The boss of the mercenary group is reported to have been killed, along with some of his lieutenants. Prigozhin has rarely been seen in public since June, when the group launched a failed mutiny against the Kremlin in protest over its handling of the conflict in Ukraine. Investigators at the crash are seeking to confirm the identities of the passengers. Well, let's talk to our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow. Dasha, what more are you hearing about this plane crash?
Well, according to the official information, 10 people were on board of the plane that was en route from Moscow to St. Petersburg and crashed in the Tver region. Now, on social media, there are videos of this plane crashing, and some viewers may indeed find those videos quite distressing. Certainly, the investigators are working on the scene of this plane crash. We understand that the wreckage has been found in the area of up to 2 to 3 kilometers from the plane crash. This is in the Tver region. The investigators are trying to establish anyone who might have been connected to the plane, and some sources quoted by the Russian media do suggest that over the course of the past 10 days the plane was in the technical maintenance in a hangar, undergoing those technical issues, and certainly many different versions are now emerging. Again, there's been no official confirmation as to what might have become the reason and the cause of what has happened. The investigators are looking into the different options, from the pilot error, from the technical malfunction, as well as the weather conditions. But what is clear at the moment that all passengers on board of that plane have died as a result of the plane crashing in the Tver region. The list of the passengers that has been released by Russia's aviation agency Rosaviatsia says that Yevgeny Prigozhin, the head of the Wagner PMC, as well as Dmitry Utkin, Prigozhin's right hand and the co-founder of the Wagner Group, has been on board of that plane. At the same time, again, many analysts here in Russia do stress that until there is the DNA testing, it is too early to pronounce Yevgeny Prigozhin to be dead. Interestingly, there are many versions as to what has happened, and we have heard from the head of the Akhmat group of forces saying that it is necessary now to look at who might have been benefiting from the death of Yevgeny Prigozhin, to establish who is actually behind that. He suggested that could be the French or the Americans. So certainly there are many versions, but we are waiting for the official confirmation from the Russian authorities as to what has happened.
So far, no response from the Kremlin. What's been the wider response in Russia?
Well, certainly the Kremlin has not commented on this whole situation, and the Russian president was talking at an important event, the commemoration of the Kursk battle in Russia's Kursk region. The Russian president was talking at the BRICS summit, but no word as to what has happened to this plane crashing in the Tver region. Now, speaking to the people here in Russia, you can see that they are very puzzled as to what has happened. Some say they simply do not believe that Yevgeny Prigozhin could be dead. They do insist that most likely there has been staged, that Yevgeny Prigozhin could have taken a different plane. And there are some reports that indeed Yevgeny Prigozhin had a tendency of registering to one plane by taking another plane instead. So certainly this is the speculation that we have at the moment, but people do insist that that could be one option. Others do say that that could be the matter of revenge, and indeed Yevgeny Prigozhin has tried to start the mutiny. He was marching in the so-called March of Justice with a tank towards the Russian capital. So they do believe that this could not have gone unanswered in Russia. But others do say that indeed you have to look at who benefits from the death of Yevgeny Prigozhin, and say that a Ukrainian trace could also be found here.
Dasha, thank you for that. Our correspondent Dasha Chernyshova in Moscow. Well, France says there are reasonable doubts about the cause of the crash that killed Yevgeny Prigozhin, while Germany's foreign minister said the presumed death of the Wagner chief followed a pattern of unclarified fatalities in Russia. But what's been the reaction in Ukraine? Let's talk to our correspondent Yolo Abdavid in Zaporizhzhia. Yolo, some pro-Kremlin elements in Russia claiming Ukraine is behind this plane crash. What is Kyiv saying?
Well, it's Independence Day here in Ukraine, so that's why probably President Zelensky went out of his way pretty quickly to say that the Ukrainian government has no relationship with what's happened. And he even tongue-in-cheek said, look, everybody knows that we have asked for planes from different countries in the world, but this is completely different to what we meant. So
it seems that they wanted to clarify as soon as possible that they were not involved in any underhand dealing. And one of his closest advisors went further, Mikhail Podolyak. He said, look, this is a good lesson to everybody who thinks that you can negotiate with the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, in terms of negotiation with any potential ceasefire in the future. That is an excellent, what's happened to Prigozhin and his Wagner comrades is an excellent inoculation against stupidity. So there isn't much doubt here who's behind this and who had most to benefit. And I think that the majority of people on social media, including that very quick response really from President Zelensky in the Ukraine, shows that they think that he's been liquidated. That means that almost the entire cohort of people who are running the Wagner Group have basically been killed. And when people are actually trying to summarize what does this mean in terms of the continuing battle in the eastern side of Ukraine, and most people think that actually it doesn't change what is targeted here, the airstrikes that happened. We've just had an air raid siren here in Zaporizhia, and there's, even if the Russian state doesn't confirm what has happened to this aeroplane between Moscow and St. Petersburg, there's plenty of cynicism and skepticism.
Yolo, thank you for that. Our correspondent Yolo Abdavid in Zaporizhia. The former United States President Donald Trump is due to surrender in Atlanta as part of his fourth indictment. Trump and his co-defendants are accused of trying to reverse his 2020 election loss in the state of Georgia. He's called his indictments politically motivated. The Associated Press correspondent Philip Crowther is in Atlanta. Philip, Trump due to surrender today as part of his fourth indictment.
Yeah, this being Donald Trump, he is expected to, well, pretty much make the most of this day, or rather these few hours he will be spending here in Atlanta, because, first of all, his surrender and his short arrest at the Fulton County Jail is expected to happen in American prime time. In other words, the Trump campaign and his team have essentially tried to place this at a time where the most people might possibly be watching this. And of course, Donald Trump and his campaign, of course he's running for president again, will try and turn this into a campaign event of sorts and raise funds as well off the back of it, as he has managed to do with the three previous indictments in New York, in Miami, and in Washington. But this is serious stuff, and it is likely to leave us with what might be one of the most famous or infamous photos of recent U.S. history, because Donald Trump, the former U.S. president, is expected to have his mugshot taken. That means a photo, a portrait of the defendant in this case that is expected to be released to the public later on, maybe as late as tomorrow. And Donald Trump, of course, being a candidate for office, will try and make this look like he is the victim of something that he calls political election interference. But this is what his day will look like here in Atlanta. He will be departing from his private club in New Jersey and is expected to spend a very short amount of time here on the ground in Atlanta, most of that time at the Fulton County Jail. That is where he is going to surrender. That is where he's going to get his fingerprints taken. It's where he's going to have that mugshot taken that is expected to be released to the public. And thereafter, he will be released again, because he will be paying that $200,000 bond that allows him out of jail and back on the campaign trail, essentially. He is not expected in court today, by the way. That is going to happen another time, most likely at the beginning of September. So we are likely to see more, of course, of Donald Trump here in Atlanta. He will be formally charged, most likely at the beginning of next month.
Philip, thank you for that. Philip Crowther from the Associated Press in Atlanta. The death toll from the latest wildfires in Greece has now risen to 20. Cars, homes and factories have burned, and hundreds of people forced to leave a district on the outskirts of Athens. The fire brigade has warned that more wildfires could break out. They've described the conditions as difficult and in some cases extreme. and 60 firefighters have now been injured battling the flames. Well, CGTN's correspondent Evangelo Sipsas is in Athens. Evangelo, Parliament is meeting to discuss the country's response, the political response to the wildfires.
Yep, that's right. The Greek government today gave a report to all the other political parties here in Greece of how the situation is on the ground and what the government is doing. So far, they said that these wildfires are the worst that the country has seen since 2000. There are more than 8 aircrafts from the European Union through this exchange program, the Rescue Exchange Program, more than 250 firefighters from different countries, but also there have been a number of fire trucks that are assisting in these wildfires. Now, the government has said that there will be also a curfew, a pedestrian and a vehicle curfew in all the forest areas in the country starting today, from 8 a.m. till 8 p.m., at least for the next 24 hours, because that's where we're going to see the winds continue to pick up. Now, the Greek Minister of Civil Protection, Mr. Kikilias, has come on television and is warning to those who are potential arsonists out there that there's going to be harsh punishments if you are caught, he said specifically, trying to put fires in the areas. Now, there are people that have been arrested. Just today, more than 9 people have been arrested suspectedly trying to put a fire near the area of Parkinson, but also 13 people are being taken in front of a judge now to be read with different charges of trying to put arson, but also causing bodily harm. Now, the thing, though, here is that the Syriza political party and the PASOK party have immediately responded to those statements from the Greek government, saying that the government is failing to protect very important infrastructure, such as military bases, but also hospitals, with the scenes from the evacuation of the hospital in Alexandroupolis, while the PASOK Syriza party is saying that the government is failing to protect the environment. Now, on the fire front, though, unfortunately, as you can see now, the wind is also picking up here, making it much more difficult. So in the area here in Athens, volunteers and firefighters are scrambling to try to push the fire away from urban areas, while in Evros, which is the largest fire that we're seeing right now, more than 73,000 hectares are burning, saying that the European Union has said that this wildfire in Evros is the largest one that the European Union has seen this year.
Evangelo, thank you for that. Our correspondent, Evangelo Sipsas in Athens. And finally, it's weigh-in day for the residents of London Zoo. Penguins, tigers, meerkats and even stick insects got on the scales for their yearly checkup. Some animals were given an extra treat for their cooperation. This annual weigh-in is a chance for London Zoo to make sure the information they've recorded is up to date. The measurements are then added to a global database. The headlines again. BRICS gets bigger. 6 more countries join up. China's President Xi Jinping says the expansion will inject new vitality to the group's cooperation. Our other headlines: Japanese seafood banned by China as treated wastewater from the defunct Fukushima nuclear power station is released into the Pacific. And a body believed to be that of the Wagner chief, Yevgeny Prigozhin, has been removed from the plane crash wreckage outside Moscow. And that is the world today. Thank you for watching. There's more news on CGTN Europe's channel, on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. We're back with more news at the top of this hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.